recording going here. I need this to turn on first. So I went through and I should have updated attendance for everything. I believe attendance is fully updated, and I graded all the chapter quizzes. And chapter 3 will open up right after this, so there's no delay on that. For chapter 2, I noticed that like at random, some of the questions were not populating all the answers. And so like some of you guys probably saw blank answers, right? So what it was that if I sometimes I don't like to put throwaway answers. Like if there's only 3 logical choices, I just put 3. There's an option you have to tick when you do that. Otherwise, it will fill in a 4th option, and it's blank. So some people got confused by that, and if they didn't think it was the 3 answers, they would choose the blank answer, right? Well, technically, that cuts down your chance of getting it right by like 8%, because instead of 33, it's 25. So everybody got a bonus 2 points to make up for the fact that there was these extra like random questions or like random spots. Most of you got it right anyway, so it didn't matter. So you just got 2 points on top of that. But there you go. That's why. So if you see that you have a score over 20, well, you had the bonus question, but everybody could have got 3 bonus points as long as they answered the first question, which they did. So cool. Thank you. You're welcome. No one's ever thanked me before. I appreciate that. I don't like to say, I don't think it's needed though, because it's like, I'm not like giving something. Like that was a mistake. So that just made up the mistake, you know? But thank you.
Yeah, but you didn't have to. So.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah. Besides that, it was most people wanted to push everything back a week. I added that week for that reason. COVID cases have gone way down. I've had like none of my classes since the first week. So hopefully there's no more issues with that. We did push the schedule back 1 week entirely. So if you look at the syllabus, everything's back a week. I'm posting another schedule. It'll be more detailed about everything. But that means like the Zoom case isn't due this Sunday. It's due the following Sunday now, because it's got external and internal in it. And we're covering external today and internal next week. So I can't make it be due before we do internal, even though you all would probably be fine. What's up?
What exactly is the Zoom case?
That's what I'm about to explain. Great question. So I opened it up. Can you guys see it now? Right? Awesome. So you all are my guinea pigs in a way. Not really. I had another professor who does things a different way than I have, and I like it. So it's like a guided case approach for the first case, at least. So typically what we do is I give you like a handful of questions I want you to answer, and I give you a case, and then I say, answer these questions in a big write-up format. So give me like 8 pages, right? This is a more guided approach that kind of looks like a quiz. You can click it. You can see very specific questions that I'm asking. But then instead of writing a whole 8-page paper, I ask you a specific question, and then you fill in your answer right there, right? And then we go to the next section. I want to be clear, this is still paper length. So when you answer these questions, it's not like 1 or 2 sentences. Like you need to write. If it takes 2 or 3 paragraphs, fill it out, right? The cases, you have a case document. There's also several videos. The reason I like it is because I can put the videos timely throughout it and be like, okay, watch this video, then answer these. Read the case, then answer these. There's a part 1 and a part 2, because part 1 deals with I think part 1's external and part 2 deals with internal. So again, it breaks it up. So we're very specific. If you have any questions after you get to look at the case, let me know. It's not timed or anything, because I know it looks like it's a quiz. Once you click it, you can go and look at all the questions, answer them, come back, finish it later, whatever you need to do. Cool. Also, Canvas has a decent spell check. I would recommend doing it in Microsoft Word and then importing it in, because the spell check there is better. Canvas will sometimes miss random things, even though you think it would just like integrate and use all the same. But yes, so what we're covering today will be a big part of what you do on the Zoom case. And we've already covered a little bit of the internal stuff when we did like Starbucks and AMC and stuff. But next week will be more specific about what you need to do for the Zoom part. So if you want, you can do the external part of Zoom this week, then the internal part next week. And then the next case will be much more about a fast analysis and then directly answering what to do next. Cool? Great. I like the guided approach of the Zoom thing. I had Professor Porchek did it, and I really liked how she did that. And she showed it to me, and I was like, this is cool. So I'm going to try it out. Also, reading 9-10 pages for like 25 students kind of sucks. And like inevitably, I'll feel like I miss things if I don't read them super detailed and I want everybody to get the most points. But in this case, it's like, answer this, and then you can elaborate as much as you want. Also, this isn't a knock on university settings, but like how many times do you like write 10 pages of just text in industry? Not very often. It's usually like numbers and then presentations. But so today we're going to evaluate the external environment. I'm going to lecture again for like an hour, and then we're going to do a cool little group activity like we did last time. The group activity we're doing at the end is on Best Buy, because when I originally wrote this lecture, I yelled, Jael, name a large company. And she said Best Buy. And I wrote a case on Best Buy. That's what we did. Actually, she named a few, but Best Buy was the first one she said. And I went and tried to find good cases on all these things, and Best Buy was the winner. So today we're going to look at 3 different analytic tools. The first one is Pastel. The second one's Porter's 5 Forces, which if you've been in business for any length of time, you've surely heard the second one, maybe not the first. And the last one, Strategic Group Mapping. For Zoom, I believe you just have to do Porter's and Pastel. I don't really do a lot. I don't know how to use my foot. I don't use Strategic Group Mapping a lot. So before we start, we're going to talk a little bit about closed systems and open systems. So spoiler alert, closed systems basically don't exist. So all throughout history, we have tons of business examples of organizations creating a project or a product that no one actually wants, right? There was a period of time, I don't know if any of you guys remember this. You know when Apple was releasing like 1 billion iPods, right? So they had, at one point, they had the iPod, bam. And they're like, ooh, now we're going to make a fat one that has lots of memory. Oh, that makes sense. I want more songs. Done. And then they made like a shuffle, super tiny. And they're like, perfect for running. Flip it in. Good. And then they made a mini. And it was like, why? And then they made a nano, which was like smaller than a mini, but it wasn't a shuffle. And there was a period, like a small quarter, in which they released, I think it was the mini. And they released the mini and their stocks tanked. And the kind of point was they didn't actually understand at the time what people wanted, or like what they were really, they almost starved themselves out, right? Ford did the same thing. Ford released a vehicle, I'm blanking on the name right now. It was a type of car in the 90s, I believe it was. And they released it thinking that it's what everybody wanted and thinking that they were filling some niche among their competition. And it completely tanked because it turns out nobody wanted that car. And you're not actually filling a need that anybody has. That's the idea of closed and open systems. A closed system would be your organization operates entirely solely, meaning what you do in your organization 100% determines your organization's success or failure. Right? So whatever I do in my organization, the decisions I make are how successful I'm going to be. That doesn't exist. There are some people that will argue there's certain organizations that could operate in a closed system, but for the most part, open systems is everything, is every organization. So an open system is, yes, your company matters, your decisions matter, but who you're buying from, their system influences your system. Who you're selling to, the economy, the political realm that you're, or like the politics of the area that you're selling in, different laws, legal forces, all of this determines your company's success. So in that way, every organization operates in a true open system. Everything influences you and you influence other things, right? Your competition, what they're doing. So the idea that closed systems can exist at all is almost naive. It really can't be that way. Because let's say you're even if you're a dominant company, whatever you're making, nobody else can make, and it's foolproof. Well, what happens if politics change and consumers can't buy your product or whatever, right? Like there's all these factors that can influence it. I guess you could try to argue like insulin, maybe, but then you have to worry, what if somebody else makes insulin? even know who makes insulin? There's got to be like a company.
3 major companies that
Really?
otherwise.
Is Pfizer one? It's always freaking Pfizer. Pfizer reported a 4% decrease in projected revenue this morning. And then people bashed on them because they were like, your product's only protected by the government. How did you report a deficit? They said they didn't sell as many vaccines as they thought they would. Take that. I also do want to point out, there is a theory out there called I think it's called ultimate open systems. And ultimate open systems argues that there are actually a ridiculous amount of systems that all influence each other. And I don't like, it's a theory, but really it's just an interesting way to look at organizations. So the ultimate systems would say, let's go to the very, very macro level. Your assembly line, like literally the people that work on my assembly line and what we make is a system. And it's influenced by the whole manufacturing floor and like the manager and what all the other assembly lines are doing. Meaning like, we can only build this part of the product as long as that assembly line over there is building their part of the product in time, right? So these systems all influence, and that's all underneath one roof of like the manufacturing, and that's all one part of a larger organization, and that organization is inside of an industry, and that industry is inside of a country, and that country is part of a global market. And so it's the idea that systems are actually like very, very minute, and then they're all in part, it's like nesting dolls all the way up. Cool way to think about it. That's a big ship. I spent way too long trying to find a good ship crashing in the ocean. By the way, ocean's a terrible place. Anybody that thinks otherwise is wrong. I hate the ocean. It scares me to death.
Less than 10%'s been like explored.
Yeah, see, things like that. Someone told me we know more about the space than the ocean. That seems impossible, but I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Ocean's terrifying. Seen too many videos, too many scary things. Anyway, I'm also from Oklahoma, and the deepest water here is like 30 feet. So, yeah. I like this analogy because it's the idea of the ship at sea is an organization. So your organization is like a ship at sea, and you can only do so much on the boat to control your success. The ocean's terrifying. Because the ocean and everything around it, that storm's coming, the weather's coming, the way the ocean moves and ebbs and flows, and all of that happens all around your organization and influences your journey. And the only thing organizations can do is adjust their own sails and try to plan accordingly. That's it. It's a great analogy for the idea of the external environment matters. You only have so much control, so you have to plan. So, to show you why the external environment matters, what explains firm profitability? This is what research shows. Kind of spooky. The industry you are in, so not your organization, but the industry you're in, the clothes industry, food industry, whatever, 10 to 20% of a firm's profitability is determined by the actual industry. So maybe the industry is doing well, so you do well. The industry is doing poorly, so you do poorly. Or do at least 10 to 20% worse. Now, what we like to believe and hope is that the firm is accountable for about 30 to 45%, which is a lot, of their own profitability. As in your own direct decisions, your ability to create competitive disadvantages or advantages. And then research suggests that roughly the other environmental factors that we'll also talk about today in addition to the industry account for about 35 up to 60% of your profitability. So that's everything else influencing on you. Now that sounds kind of crazy, but when we break it down, it's not that crazy. Now, strategic management, obviously, in most classes, we are interested in two things in business, which is increasing firm profitability and increasing the well-being of our employees. I made a mistake my first year of my PhD when I was with Dr. Lisa Lambert, who's a genius in our field and loves what she's doing and does it for the right reasons. And she was like, what's the purpose of our work, Seth? And I was like, to make industries make more money. She was like, I like to believe that it's to improve the lives of the employees. And I was like, oh, okay. Sorry, I just come off my MBA where we were like money. And so, yes. But arguably, strategic management's mostly concerned about money. I'm an organizational behavior scientist, and that's more concerned about the individuals. But here. So we can break down the environment in 3 ways. First, we have the external or general environment. This is what Pastel is going to analyze. Then we get a little bit closer to the firm, and we have what I typically refer to as the industry environment. It's also called the competitive environment, or if you have my fundamentals class, we call it the task environment. Now, Porter's 5 forces addresses this. And then finally, we have the internal environment, which we're not going to talk about so much today. That's actually within the organization. So within the organization, within the industry, and then everything else around it. Make sense? I haven't color coordinated it. On the quiz, I thought I was clever, and I switch out words like industry, competitive, and task, and like external and general. Don't get tripped up by that. I'm not that clever. So first, we're going to start with Pastel. Now, I have one little issue that I'm going to start now. Pastel is like, we always talk about Pastel and then never about who created it. Now, Porter's 5 forces is in the name. So everybody knows Michael Porter at Harvard created Porter's 5 forces, or at least you all will. So Pastel was created by Francis Aguilar in 1964, which is only like 5 years before Porter's 5 forces was created, and it's at the same business school. So I don't know why he doesn't get credit for this. But Francis Aguilar created Pastel. However, it wasn't originally Pastel. He wrote a novel called Scanning the Business Environment. That's it right there. You can get it on Amazon. I also think it's a free PDF download, most places now. And it's really not worth reading, to be honest. We about to write it down. Yeah, it's outdated concepts, and the idea is that Pastel came from it, but it's been changed so much that unless you want to know the beginnings, there's more modern books that are more beneficial. So it's you just want like a history of business, the way to go. But I'm pretty sure you can download it for free. It was originally called Pest because that sounds cooler. Or originally only had Pest, but it actually was the letters ETPS. And then someone was like, we should rearrange those to make it prettier. And so it became Pest. Now, I wish I could stand up here and tell you guys how it became Pastel, but I can't. It was ETPS. Someone said we should change it to Pest. And then that was Arnold Brown, I believe. And then the EL, so Arnold Brown changed it and then kind of added to it, and then it went through a few people's hands, and then today it's modernly known as Pastel, and we added the legal realm and the environmental realm to it. But no matter how much I've done research, I can't figure out who officially coined Pastel. Yeah, interesting. Just a lot of people's hands. But that's all minor. I just wanted to give him credit where credit's due. So now we can actually talk about it. So Pastel breaks down the general environment in these ways: political, economic, sociocultural, technological, environmental, and finally legal. And at the end of this, we'll give kind of a breakdown of one. So the point of this is that if we look at an organization, we can address it based on each of these. We can look at the political realm, the economic realm, and so on, and we can determine the different forces and what kind of effects they're going to have on our organization. Because they matter. I also want to point out something else, because you're going to get tripped up when you fill this out later. A lot of these tend to overlap. So laws that change legally often are in the political realm and vice versa as well. Politics affect economy. Sociocultural can be linked to our political. Technology can affect economy. Like all of them can kind of blend. So first, with the political forces, I put a few examples right there, but I also pulled this from somebody else. So political forces can include trading policies, different governmental leaderships, foreign pressures, conflicts in the political area. Look at a company like TikTok and what happened with them when all hell broke loose between Trump trying to crack down on China. When Trump decided we're going to make things, I don't want China stealing information, I want to hinder China's growth. And then all of a sudden you have TikTok, which is owned by ByteDance, and ByteDance is sitting here like, well, now our company that became worth $1 billion in 2 years is literally a week away from completely failing. I don't think have I talked about TikTok, what happened with them? I mean, really briefly, what happened, if you don't know, was TikTok was created, owned by ByteDance. It turns out that the app was it's used 60 to 80% of users are American, despite the company being in China. And the app was recording facial data, and then ByteDance was giving it to the Chinese government. That's confirmed. This is a conspiracy. It was very open knowledge. They were giving it to the Chinese government at the time, and when Trump took office, he decided he was going to crack down on all this stuff. And so him and China kind of got into this war about it, and he was like, we're going to shut down TikTok unless you sell it to an American company. And then China essentially said, you can sell, told ByteDance, you can sell to an American company, but we get to maintain the data, which completely is against the whole point of why they wanted to do it. So then when it looked like a deal was going to happen, China said, we're going to poison pill the company, which basically means we're going to tax the crap out of them and we're going to destroy the company. So then nobody in America wanted to buy it. It's like Walmart bid for it, Facebook bid for it, Microsoft bid for it. It's like, well, if we buy it, then it's going to be dead by the time I actually take it over. So now I don't want to buy it. And TikTok was literally 24 hours away from being shut down. Because if they shut down, it was bad for China, because if they shut down, ByteDance was going to go under, because you lose 60 to 80% of your business like that. It's gone. And so they're going to go under. Well, now you're China, you lose $1 billion industry. And if you're America, China had threatened to essentially pull all of its apps that were Chinese created to America. Well, that's a problem because we use a lot of them here and they're really beneficial to American society. And so Americans were getting mad also because it's like, well, I don't want to lose WhatsApp and all this other stuff, right? Yeah. Now, what ended up happening was it got the majority shares were sold to an American company. A lot of the company's still owned by China, but America hosts the data. It worked out. But all of that was a political pressure. And poor ByteDance is just kind of sitting there, just like, just kind of, do the renegade. Is that what it was? Was that right? The renegade? I didn't mean to look right at you, but we've talked about TikTok before. Okay. So. I don't have as many cool stories for the rest of these. That was it. That's a good one. Then we have economic forces. This really comes into play right now. Political, economic, and legal, especially, have all been vastly affected by what recently? Oh, and socioculturally, to be fair. What in the last 2 years? COVID, the pandemic, yes, like crazy. It became political, which obviously influences a lot. It became a cultural thing. There's different laws you have to follow. But economically, outside of actual COVID, like the disease itself or virus itself, what ended up happening in the United States was unemployment, loss of jobs, GDP suffered, stock market suffered, GameStop became super relevant for some reason, all sorts of weird things. And interest rates and everything have been fluctuating. Now, that's difficult. If the economy suffers and you're a company, I always point to Starbucks, or let's say like a luxury car company, when people don't have disposable income, they don't buy. You couldn't really plan for this kind of economic recession. Now, the economy pretty much affects every organization unless you have a product that everybody has to have. Like if you are the #1 supplier of milk or something like that. Like milk tends to be recession-proof. People buy milk because it's used in everything. But economic forces are always going to affect everybody. Disposable income, unemployment levels, foreign exchange rates, interest rates, trade tariffs, inflation rate, all of this jazz. Make sure my phone's off. Forgot. Okay, good. I have a really obnoxious ringtone, so if it goes off, it's like really disruptive. Now, sociocultural. Culture changes slowly, and I don't have the research to back this, but I know that traditionally culture changes slowly. I'm sure there's research now to suggest that culture is actually changing faster than ever because of the speed of information. Because I know things are like way different than they were 10 years ago for me. I mean, vastly. So culture rapidly changes. We tend to be, this is also kind of funny. The more well off a society is, the more susceptible they are to things like this because you can worry more about things like this instead of just like surviving. It's like you move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so you care about stuff that's less relevant. But general trends that have been consistent are things like changes in the workforce. More women are entering the workforce than ever. The workforce is becoming more diverse than ever. People are leaving the workforce later, so the workforce is getting older. These are all changes that can affect your organization. They can affect what policies you have. Also, organizations more so before. I know this is kind of in the political realm. If you really think about within an organization, how much has politics and stuff began to influence organizations? If all of a sudden they find out that an organization has given money to someone that ended up having a scandal later, or maybe they gave money to someone who then later was a backer for an ex-candidate, boom, huge fallout. Or like, your company supported J.K. Rowling's, and then she has that throw, and then it's like, okay, now you've divided society. Half these people think that your culture is this, half people say this. Look at Spotify right now. Spotify's having to have internal control because they host Joe Rogan, who's got things that are controversial and divide people here and here. And now internally and externally, Spotify's like, well, I've got people canceling accounts for this. If I get rid of Joe Rogan, it's another cultural signal. So now I'm going to lose these people. And despite what we want to believe, my personal opinion and what appears to be true is companies like Spotify are going to go, okay, if we keep up, what's the way we can maintain the most amount of people? That's the decision, right? Like, what can we do to keep the most people? So, like, does Joe Rogan have enough followers that it's worth keeping him? Also, if you didn't notice, do you know Rumble is another company coming out that's like YouTube kind of? And when all of this hit the fan, it appeared that Spotify was going to do nothing, and then Spotify started leading like they were going to do more. And then Rumble offered Joe Rogan the exact same contract they just got from Spotify. And then Spotify the next day, CEO came out and said, if we silence his voice, that's a dangerous trend. I was like, confirming they don't want to move. And that didn't happen until the offer was made by a different company. So I know, right? But it's all about timing and signaling. But I mean, if you're Spotify and you host someone like Joe Rogan and you host people across all sort of political aisles, and then one thing happens and the culture's changed, and now it's like, well, how could have Spotify ever predicted this? Ever, right? Isn't this fun? It's like this whole lecture is like, you guys are all going to go to the business world, and what you do doesn't matter. God determines if you succeed. It becomes a religious class. It's all just whatever.
I do feel like COVID is the new like Sunday school answer though. You know, like in Sunday school, the right answer is always Jesus.
Yeah.
I feel like in classes and stuff now, the right answer is COVID.
Well, from a business perspective, it has become absurd how much COVID has changed things. I have to throw out entire lectures and like decks of slides. And I know you took my HR class. My HR class, I have like a whole set of statistics I talk about. And last semester, I literally had to create a second deck of slides and say, this is traditional. This is what's happening in the last 2 years. And just put completely different. I mean, because we were talking about statistics about like difficulty of fighting employees, and there being like a 60% sway between 2 years. I'm like, I can't teach you that 60% of industries can't find employees because that's true now, but it's not traditionally accurate. Well, also COVID for this lecture is like the ultimate. Who predicted that? Yeah, I put tons of these here just so you all have them. Technological changes. This is why Blockbuster was out of business all of a sudden. Why taxi companies started struggling, because it turns out it was easier to use apps, right? Newspapers, AOL Instant Messenger, all of these things. Books, even. I mean, Amazon pretty much took over selling books. Like, oh, we'll do it online. It's much easier. The technological advances, often you are the ones making them, but you can't control general changes always, right? Technology is always getting faster and better. Also, because of technology, we tend to become more globalized, right? And now it's like, okay, if you're not selling internationally, you're losing. Lecture for 30 minutes, that's too much. That's quite quick. This one's interesting because, like I said, originally we just had pest. This is all we cared about, and that kind of makes sense. Especially because I'm one of those people that I think legal is a little bit parceled out of these, but obviously I'm in the wrong because everybody else uses it. Really ecological, you're also concerned about the environment, how the environment's changing, also how people perceive the environment's changing matters too. That gets sociocultural. It's like you have some people saying it's a big climate change, people say it's not a big climate change. I'm not talking about climate change right now. Don't say I deny or support part of this at all. But what I'm saying is it does matter people's perceptions about what your company's doing. But there's a push for things like recycling, the availability of natural resources. And look what happened to the oil and gas industry. It was kind of ended up being a political move as well as ecological when the pipeline was ended up being shut down. And all of a sudden, availability of natural resources for certain companies is much more difficult. And then finally, legal forces. Gosh, this whole lecture is like a minefield. I was about to give the Canadian trucker example because the laws changed there, and then all of a sudden, everything happened. So, I mean, we can use COVID. There was a new OSHA regulation for a while that you're going to have vaccines for people who get over 100 employees. Now, that threw a whole wrench in your organization that you couldn't plan for. So all of a sudden, you have to decide, okay, let's say I have 100 employees exactly, and 20 of them are very anti-vaccine. Do I want to pay for them to get tests weekly? What if they refuse to get tests weekly? Can I afford to fire 20% of my workforce right now? Can I afford to incur fines if I don't? Right? And that was just a change in law. I mean, let's take everything else out of it. That was just a law change that you had to adapt to in about 3 months, which is nothing. That is not a lot of time. Here at OSU, we got emails weekly because we have over 100 employees, obviously, and we were about to, everybody's going to have to be vaccinated, and just got just so much thrown at us all of a sudden, week after week after week. OSU had to set up an entire portal where you could report your vaccine status, right? So they could see it because they had to have it. And the best way to do it is digitally. Then doesn't it feel kind of flimsy? Like Giles going to Colorado next week and they require vaccines to go to restaurants, right? And so she's like, oh, I have to show my card. And I'm like, that piece of paper that the lady at Walmart gave you and like signed her name. I was like, yeah, photocopy it, white out your name and put someone else's name. Go to any restaurant you want.
That's not true.
Is it not true? Please tell me.
I just got back 2 days ago and I have to show my card.
Really?
Breckenridge and Denver.
Question. Do you think it was like individual businesses that just refused to do it? The only reason I asked, you could be 100% right.
Okay. I was worried too because what I read online was the same thing that you're saying.
That's what we were told.
I read too.
Yeah. See, I'm a researcher and I looked this all up and they were like, bring your vaccine card because you have to have it to get into restaurants.
Yeah, not true. And I heard it was stricter on the mountain.
They did require?
They made a show.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe it's hit and miss, but
Maybe it's hit and miss. I don't know.
There was a few businesses like they had signs out front that said like, but
A lot of organizations, I'm sure, can be very pro-vaccine, but also it's like, do I want to deal with disgruntled customers? Because it's going to happen, especially, they're going to a ski resort. So it's going to be people there to spend money that feel entitled, like my wife.
New York City wouldn't let you go into anything without showing your vaccine and your ID.
New York City wouldn't?
You couldn't do anything there.
I know, and then here in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I know. It was a big culture shock there and back.
Oh, well, yeah, that's been the big thing. Across state lines, culture has changed drastically. Also, if you think about, like, I'm about to talk about Pepsi, you think about like FDA requirement changes, something that affects organizations all the time. I don't know if I put it up here either. I didn't put it here. If you think about like the SOX Act, what the SOX Act was Enron. Enron stole a bunch of money and report their finances very well. They still money. They falsely reported money. Stole it from people buying stocks, so I guess that's fair. The SOX Act essentially, in all of its ridiculous amount of detail, the end of the SOX Act is now you have to report finances much more detailed, and it's quite expensive to do so. It costs large organizations a lot of money to keep up the regulations. So now you're sitting here as literally any company, and Enron does tomfoolery over here. First of all, I said tomfoolery in class. Tomfoolery over here. And then now all of a sudden, everybody has to spend all this money making sure their finances are very visible, right, and presented in a certain way. The FDA, we see recalls all the time. People get in trouble for having certain things in their type of food. If Coca-Cola turns out to have contaminated water or they're not reaching water standards, it will ripple down if the FDA feels that they need now to create a new policy to ensure water is not being contaminated or water standards are okay. There's a question on the quiz about this. And now every soft drink company has to implement whatever they need to do to make sure they reach this standard. Heinz ketchup, if you didn't know, got caught with a guy peeing into the ketchup in the deal. And because of that, you have to have like certain cameras and all this stuff monitoring what people are doing in your manufacturing. Yeah, man. World's messed up. Found a feather in my salad one time at Walmart, and that was weird to me.
That one story I heard about a dead rat in a salad bag that's being sold at Walmart.
Oh, my dad had a dead mouse in his Coke one time. Yeah. Now that my dad's an old man. That was a long time ago. But
one time somebody sold like a ball Frankfurter, somebody accidentally left a bullet in there.
A bullet? That feels like someone planted it. Never know.
I made brownies over the weekend. I made the Ghirardellis, and I pulled three pieces of hair out of three different brownies, and it was not my hair. And so I kept the box.
I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm just ruining everything.
So I would call them and tell them, hey, you guys got to pull it.
Yeah.
So,
So, moving on to Pepsi.
What they do.
Yeah. Well, no, we're just going to use them as an example to break things down. So, evolution of Pepsi, which is actually funny because this is the logo I know, the one from 1951 is the old logo, and that was what I was going to put on here. And then I found this cool chart that no, it used to be those hieroglyphics, and then worked its way down. But that's the old logo I know. But we'll talk about Pepsi a little bit. We'll use it as an example. I only put a couple of here. It's going to be very brief, but to make it easier for you all to see, and I put them very, very shorthand. If you didn't know, Pepsi Cola, one of the largest selling beverages and companies in the entire world. When it comes to soft beverages, their rival is obviously Coca-Cola. Also, Pepsi, if you didn't know, did this really annoying marketing campaign one time where they went around the country. This is when I was younger. They went around the country to all these different universities, and they put all these Pepsi signs, and they hired really beautiful women to dress up in cheerleading uniforms. And they brought people up and they said, we're going to do a blind taste test of Coca-Cola and Pepsi. And you tell us, college students, which one tastes better, right? And they ended up getting like this 90% rate of people that chose Pepsi over Coke. And it's like, well, yeah, who the hell can't tell the difference between a Pepsi and a Coke? And you've got Pepsi and people screaming in your face. And they sold that as evidence that people appreciate Pepsi more than the Coca-Cola. Not bashing on Pepsi. I mean, I don't care either way. But they did that marketing ploy. That always stuck with me. Even when I was younger, I was like, that's not fair. And then I got into this field, so I could do nothing about it but bitch about it in front of people. So, for Pepsi particularly has to worry about, because they are extremely international. They sell from places like New Zealand, all the way to the United States, China, all around the world. They have to worry about varying policies in different countries. They have to worry about civil unrest that is happening in different countries. And they also have to worry about the fact that some countries are very anti-America in some ways, and they won't buy it because it's an American product. And that's all political focused. Economically, they have to worry about currently inflation, less disposable income. Even though Pepsi's fairly cheap, you could see that people actually don't buy it as much. However, when there was the economic downturn in 2008, Pepsi sales actually went up. So maybe it's recession proof. People buy more when they're stressed. I don't know. Like, is alcohol recession proof? Maybe. Cheap alcohol is. Yeah. I mean, cigarettes are definitely recession proof. People are buying them like crazy when like the economy was really bad. Socioculturally, you have varying cultures that they have to worry about around the world. Like, how do you want to market yourself to different cultures? Some cultures really care about health. So you got to be careful, right? We also worry about shifting cultures because, like here in the United States, as we start to care more about healthy living, and your Pepsi, maybe you have to start worrying about products that are like, oh, now with 3% less sugar, and then like say now with 0 sugar, and then we shift even more as a culture and we go, aspartame's bad, and it's like, well, damn, like now what do you do? You guys know Lipton tea? Lipton tea used to crush it in the summer with hot, or in the winter with hot teas, and in the summer they would do really, really well with cold tea, right? People would ice the tea. However, they found that people in the South, right, they started marketing this tea in the South as like, oh, hey, hot tea during the winter is great. And during the winter, their sales would drop in the South. Because in the South, we don't drink hot tea. We drink iced tea. And the way Lipton beat this cultural difference in the winter, because their sales would tank in the South during the winter, the way they beat this culture, this different culture, is they released a commercial of a well-to-do man with his wife sitting there looking out the window, watching it snow, and his wife walks up to him and hands him a glass of iced tea, and he drinks the iced tea and goes, "That's great tea." And that commercial saved them. They did great in the winter after that. But they were like, you can drink iced tea in the winter, who cares? That's literally what their marketing campaign was. So then in the South, we said, I don't care how cold it is, drink an iced tea. I put change to obtainment on here in 2 different ways, and I don't know if this is fair or not. But technologically, and up here with socioculturally, so people are definitely getting products in different ways now. And with like Walmart orders and Amazon's thinking about like dabbling into all of this, and I don't know, I put it here. I don't know if Pepsi is going to be really influenced, or a lot of soft drink companies are going to have to be like change the way they do things based on how people are obtaining their product, because you can obtain it in a lot of ways. My initial thought on this when I put it in here was I thought, oh, if people are going and picking up my groceries for me and it's changing lots of hands, I wonder if I have to change the packaging because it's being shifted through hands more often. But that doesn't seem right now. But maybe, I don't know. But you can ignore that one if you want. I was just thinking. But they definitely have to worry about social media, different changes in the way you market. Now, if you don't have some witty person on Twitter ready to snap back at Wendy's, like, you're in trouble. Yeah, that's real. Like having a good Twitter, that's funny. I mean, I don't eat Wendy's at all, and I go to their Twitter all the time because whoever runs that Twitter account's hilarious. But you have to be a part of these different social medias now. You have to be active. Economically, they have to worry about sustainability, obviously, with the way the economy is kind of adjusting right now. Or not economically. Wow, I'm flipped now. Environmental, pardon me. I'm looking at the E's. Environmentally, they have to worry about being sustainable now. Things like people care about, what are you doing with your cans? Do we need to switch to plastic? We can't do plastic either. So you have to make sure you're doing what's the most economically friendly. They need to make sure you're telling people, we're being biodegradable. And you also have to worry about things like access of supply. Now, for Pepsi, I don't know how much this influences them because I think they're just like sugar and water for the most part. However, water is hard to access in different parts of the world, and it's becoming more difficult to access, believe it or not, in different parts of the United States. So this could begin to influence them. And then legally is pretty straightforward. Changing FDA regulations, COVID-19, some of their factories had to shut down, reopen, that can adjust your costs. Cross-border laws. Now we've got things with like Canada, so your drivers have to be vaccinated if they're transporting Pepsi into Canada. If you didn't know, Pepsi got in trouble in India years ago. They had contaminated water. They were like selling Pepsi that had like bacteria and stuff in it. That went over bad. They had a massive recall. I think it's the biggest recall in potentially the biggest recall in soft drink history, I think. You're doing good. Okay. What we are going to do, we've gone for 45 minutes and I'm about to jump into another one. I want to take like 5 minutes. It's been 45, 50 minutes for everybody to kind of chill for a second. Then we're going to get into these last two metrics. We'll just take about as long, maybe a little bit less. And then you guys will have a good amount of time to do your kind of group work. And in that group work, if you need to take 5 minutes again, then that's fine. You'll have plenty of time. But let's take 5 minutes before we get into the next part and then go from there. Did everybody have like a safe snow couple days? Because the roads got like bad instantly all of a sudden.
Many of us couldn't really leave the house.
Yeah, it was rough. Like my kids who will be outside in anything, the day after it's like, I think it was Thursday or Friday. I think it was Friday. It was so cold Friday. No, it was Thursday. Thursday was so cold. My kids were like outside for like 10 minutes. We're like, no. And then that just made it all worse because they were just inside the entire day. And my kids hate each other. So I don't know what it is, man. They just do not get along. Me and my sister got along fantastic. So it was rough.
I live up on that hill at 81st and Neal.
Mhm.
It was an apartment, so I was definitely
Stuck?
stranded for a couple days. Yeah.
I thought I was gonna say that the being stuck thing is like, I started getting these like COVID like vibes again at one point. Now I have a great Jeep where I can drive around, so it was fantastic. But like, I didn't want to take my kids out through the roads and everything, so I was really stuck home. And I did most of my work at night, and my wife was working full time during the day, so I was really in charge of kids. And you start getting that like COVID, I'm stuck in my house vibes, and it's just, I can't even go outside. It was so stressful. Yeah. So we're going to spend the rest of the time on Porter's 5 Forces. I'm not going to spend much time on strategic groups. I'm going to explain what they are. I don't use it typically. The book expands on it more if you want to talk about it, and you don't need it for the Zoom case. So also, it's more of a theoretical concept and less of a tool I see people really use. So like, it's not going to help you a ton in the real world, whereas Porter's 5 Forces is more common. So now we're getting closer. We're talking about the competitive environment and your industry more directly. So this comprises of competitors, existing competitors, and potential entrants into your industry, your customers, your suppliers, and substitute products that could be outside of your industry. So like if you're in the coffee industry, it could be tea, right? That's the stupid example everybody uses, but it's good. And Porter's 5 Forces is probably it's the most famous way, and arguably the best way to look at this. So Michael Porter, who does get credit, is a Harvard professor currently, I believe. He also has 170,000 followers on Twitter. I found that out today. I added that. That was great. I was surprised. Because there's also a basketball player named Michael Porter, but he shows up first if you Google him. Yeah. He wrote How Competitive Forces Shape Strategy in 1979. If you ever want to know how ridiculous my field is, he's written 9 books and 130 articles, and that one that he wrote 40 years ago is the one people know. So How Competitive Forces Shape Strategy, and in that book is when he created essentially the Porter's 5 Forces. He established the 5 factors that, in his words, determine the nature of competition. When I was prepping this lecture today to make sure I knew what I was going to say, I was sitting there with Jael, and I had like a legitimate sad moment because I wrote a paper in my 3rd year of my PhD where I created 5 motivations for the reason people engage in deviant behaviors at work, like stealing and stuff like that. I was the first author on the paper, as Michael Porter was the first author on this. So if that paper got famous, and I had someone pass away in my family, and I couldn't help during the review process, so I had to go hands off on the project and like Dr. Lindsay Greco take over. So we agreed to switch authorship, and so now she's first author on the paper. And it's about to be published, hopefully. So now, instead of one day, y'all's children or whoever is sitting in class, and God willing, you hear about, you would heard about SMART's 5-factor motivations for organizational deviance. Now it'll be Greco's 5 factors, which is an ugly, way worse. I'm too close to SMART goals, so yeah. So this is this framework. The basics of this framework. So really what it is it's really 4 factors that all contribute to the 5th factor of actual rivalry and competition. So you have suppliers, and it's essentially the bargaining power of these suppliers, substitute products, so the threat of substitutes, people replacing your product with something else, the power of the people that actually buy your product, and then the potential for new entrants. And all of that determines how intense the rivalry is going to be among the industry. And I'll explain what that means, what high rivalry and low rivalry mean. Spoiler alert, if you're an organization, you want low rivalry. If you're a buyer, you want it to be high rivalry. You want people competing for you. So threat of new entrants is what we'll start with. So these can be eroded by the threat of someone else coming into your organization. And when they come into your organization, now people have someone else to buy from. Now you have someone trying to do what you're doing better. Now we really measure the threat of new entrants based on the barriers to entry. So the harder it is to get into an industry, the better for the organizations that are in the industry. So like the car industry, Ford, General Motors, Tesla, all those companies can set pretty comfortably in the idea that it's difficult for another company to come along and jump into your organization. Even a company, let's say like Google or something, had the Google car for a while, because they have to determine, even though we have all this capital, all this money, do I want to enter this industry that everybody's already established in and decide if I want to do this or not? Things that we can look at to determine if there's a high barrier to entry, things like economies of scale. So the longer you've been doing something, the more you've built up all of your manufacturing and your systems that are in place, the way you do things, all that stuff. Typically, the cheaper it is to make a product, right? So if economies of scale is very important, so you have all these organizations that are already in the industry with really good economies of scale, then it's going to be hard to compete against them because when you come in, your economies of scale are going to be bad, and it's going to be hard to compete with them on price. There is something called diseconomies of scale. We don't talk about that enough, so I went ahead and added a chart that includes it. There is a chance of diseconomies of scale. This is an economics lesson. Diseconomies of scale can actually happen when organizations become too big. Typically, it's for internal and external reasons. Like an internal reason would be like overcrowding. So literally, this is literally the truth. You're trying to make so much stuff. You have to get so many machines and people, and you'll actually get like crowded in an actual floor. That's actually been problems for organizations where they're struggling to get new manufacturing warehouses and stuff. They still need the machines and the people, and it becomes a problem. Also, some organizations don't translate well into bigger organizations when it comes to things like management of large groups of people, right? It's hard to manage lots of people, maybe even like across the country in different areas, right? And because of that, as they get so big, management might suffer across the board, and it actually becomes more expensive. You could also, and this is probably more likely, have external factors that affect you. So let's say I make some sort of food and I need wheat for that product. And I can buy wheat locally close to my organization for $5 a pound. I don't know how you do it. $5 a pound. And that's fine because I can buy as much wheat as I need for $5 a pound. Well, as I get bigger and I start selling more, maybe I have to sell so much that I can't buy enough wheat locally to fulfill my orders. So I have to start buying across the border or buying somewhere else and have to get it imported in. And let's say it costs $7 a pound, finally landed to get to me. Well, now if half my wheat comes here and half my wheat comes there, it actually costs me $6 to do this. So the larger I got, the more expensive it became to produce my product. But diseconomies of scale exist. Yeah, I know. Nobody talks about it. Happens all the time. Now you know. If you learned one thing from me, it's that.
So would that be called resource exhaustion?
Basically, yeah. I mean, true resource exhaustion is it doesn't exist anymore. But you can exhaust your resources essentially locally, or if you have contracts with certain suppliers and they can't supply anymore, then it's like, okay, at what point do I take the next step to get a new contract? The reason that's a problem is because when you signed your original contracts, it was probably with the lowest bidder. And so now you have to go to the third bidder or the fourth bidder or whatever, right? I'll leave that here. There we go. We can also consider things like product differentiation. So it's difficult for someone to come in and create a product like yours because yours is so different, right? It's hard to mimic what you're doing. Tesla made it more difficult for car industries to get inside of the electronic car industry, which is kind of like, I guess, a sub-industry, you could argue, because their car is so unique in what it does. It's got the 4 batteries in each tire. They have the unique features in the vehicle with the big screen and all these different things. And they've kind of created this like aura of mysticism around their product, so it makes it hard to compete. Initial capital requirements, which is why it's difficult to enter the car industry, period. You have a large capital investment or a low capital investment. switching costs. So if I want to, let's say we're Google and we want to, I think Google already kind of tried to do this, but if you want to create a new like cell phone service, well, that can be hard because it might be, it's not cheap as someone that has Verizon or AT&T to change phone plans. Will my phone work with this new plan? All this stuff, it gets expensive. So if it's difficult for your the people buying from you to switch, then that might be a barrier of entry. Maybe they don't have access to distribution channels because you've locked them all up, or your industry has them all locked up with contracts. And then independent of economics of scale, maybe you simply can't do what they do like cheaper than they can. For some reason, they have some sort of intellectual property, they have some sort of system in place, but some sort of geographical location that allows them to do something better. Or cheaper, I should say. Better's not exactly the right word, cheaper. Which is generally better. Now, bargaining power of the buyers. So whatever industry you're in, these are the people buying from you. It does not necessarily have to be landed product customers. If I'm in some industry where I'm producing raw materials to sell to other companies, the other companies are the buyers. But buyers can threaten the industry. They can force down prices. They can argue for higher quality because they're like, well, I'm not going to buy from you because they make it better. So you better make it better or buy it from them. And ultimately, they play competition against each other. This is very basic supply-demand kind of ideas, what people are willing to pay versus what you're having, and eventually we're going to reach some sort of equilibrium. If you're an organization, you hope that equilibrium is very high, right? And the buyers have very limited options. The number one example people point to is actually insulin, because you need it to live. Or coffee and tea is the other popular one. That's a substitute thing. But buyers have more control because they can buy the things. Buyer groups often have a lot of power if they're a large client, so they buy a large amount of your product compared to what you sell. So it's like if you lose me, I know you're in trouble. In a way, this is what I didn't even plan. This is what happened between the United States and China. It's like, well, if we're gone, ByteDance is gone. The products are very standard. If you're selling raw materials that anybody else can sell, buyer faces few switching costs, or the buyer poses a threat for backwards integration. Backwards integration is essentially where they decide that they're going to do what you're doing. So it's like, I need raw materials, I need wood, or whatever it is, and it's too expensive. Starbucks, best example. Starbucks and most coffee shops don't grow their own coffee beans. They buy coffee from some sort of distributor. Starbucks owns a lot of their own coffee, or their coffee fields, or whatever you call them. So in that way, it's hard to have a lot of power over Starbucks if you're selling them excess coffee beans because they own their own fields at this point. When you get as big as Starbucks, you can't trust on distribution channels you don't control. That gets dangerous. Especially for raw material like that they burn through. Starbucks running out of stuff lately. I was getting pissed. Disgruntled customer, man. Large white mocha, no foam, extra shot of espresso. Which she does all the time. So much caffeine. Feels like you're drinking like rocket fuel. It's intense. Now, bargaining powers of suppliers, whoever supplying you. Now, they can exert power by threatening to raise prices or reduce the quality of the purchased goods and services. Raise prices. I'm going to sell you umbrellas while it's raining. I'm going to charge you whatever I want. There's extortion to a degree. Like, you can only do this so much. Or price gouging. I said extortion. Price gouging. Or reduce the quality of goods and service. Do you know what Chipotle did during COVID? I love Chipotle. Chipotle started making their bowls and burritos smaller, and they said they didn't. And there were so many pictures online showing that they did. Now, insider information, what I've heard that Chipotle did was they actually had a standard on how much you could put in a bowl, and that standard did not change. Monitoring and the enforcement of that standard did. So people were like giving you scoops of food, right? And they were like, yeah, you know, be generous, whatever. And now it was like, no, exact portions. So the quality of that product went down. Love Chipotle. Almost through it, team. Supplier group can be more powerful when in the wrong place here. There's only a few companies that sell what you need, so you got to buy for them or just a couple of people. They don't have to compete with other people that sell that product. If you're under contract, contract doesn't have a set price. It has to fluctuate based on the economy around it, which does happen. Because like I can only be, if I give a 10-year contract with you, I can't guarantee the cost of raw materials. Maybe we have like a range in which I'll sell it. Or your industry is not important to them. You're a small customer compared to their group. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of overlap because it depends on what perspective of industry you're looking at. But yeah, shirt keeps coming untucked. I don't know what that means. Now, substitute products. Substitute products ultimately set a ceiling on the price that you can sell because eventually you're going to push them to a point where they're just going to switch to another product. This happens when whatever your product does, there's a different industry that can fill that same need. And again, coffee and tea is always a big one. They both need caffeine. They're both hot drinks typically, or cold drinks in the South. And they're different industries, but you can substitute one or the other. I used to have so many more better examples than that because I hate that example, and I don't know what happened.
Dr. Pepper versus Mr. Pibb.
But they're both kind of in the same industry. Or they both are in the same industry.
Oh, okay, yeah, Coke. And you talk about like, does it have to be in a different industry though?
Well, I mean, you can talk about like the problem with this is like the closed open system idea of like so many different areas of what is an industry, right? Is it the drink industry or is it the soft drink industry? Or is it the carbonated soft drink industry? You know what I mean? So yeah, I guess you could argue, yeah, you're not wrong. I'm just trying to think, I want like a big example. Something massive. What is something?
What about like fake designer bags?
Ooh, maybe. I talked about fake designer bags. Oh, I did it in here and in another class. I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot. I feel like you're looking up some right now. You started typing away all of a sudden.
Oh, no. I'm just,
Oh, I thought you were pulling up a great example. I've been sitting here stalling, waiting for you to be like, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. What?
Coffee or tea?
Yeah, coffee and tea was the one I was using. Or vaping and cigarettes. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Enough that we're all brainstorming because we understand the point, which is the point of the class. So now, all of this, as we look back here, gosh, so many things. All of these things determine the industry competition and the rivalry among existing firms. How much do I have to compete with the people around me due to these other forces? The more I have to compete with them, the harder it is. But the better for the consumer, typically. That's a problem with insulin. There's no substitute. There's only so many people that make it, right? I'm pretty sure insulin has a patent on it, so only some people can make it. But when it's high intensity, you're going to have people jockeying for position within it. You're going to have lots of price competition, the ridiculous amount of advertising battles. That is why there are certain companies out there that have 1 million advertisements and certain ones that have none. I mean, you used to see Budweiser competition or ads everywhere. There's a lot of beer out there. Coca-Cola, Pepsi. There's a lot of competition among them. I can buy this drink or this drink. Could Coke, if you love Coke, could they ever get away with selling for twice the cost of Pepsi? No way. You just can't. There's too many other products out there. And another company, you don't see very many advertisements at all. The car industry, as much as we talk about like the difficulty to get in, there's a lot of competition within it though. Like the average consumer doesn't understand the difference between a Ford or a Chevy or a Dodge truck, right? Like I don't know. Someone always has a strong opinion on which one's better, but I don't know. I just want a Tesla because it drives itself. I think that's cool. So I took this from Panmore. Panmore Industries does, if you go to their website, they do a quarters breakdown of multiple different companies. Now they do like a several page thing, but they do highlight points. I took their top 2 points for each of these, and I'm going to disagree with some of them, but here they are. So ultimately we measure, because everybody's affected by everything, but they could be a strong force or a weak force or a moderate force, right? If it's a strong force, then it really matters. It's really having an effect on the competition. Weak force is not. This is what they say about Apple. This was done, I think, in 2018, 2019, so it's fairly relevant. They said that the power of buyers is a strong force. So the power of buyers like myself and all of you is very, very high. They argued for a low switching cost. Now, this is the first place I'm going to disagree. I don't know how easy it is to actually switch from an Apple book to I would argue it's at least moderate, not low. Like it's not low, I don't think. Maybe people disagree with me. But I can't use an Apple computer at all. I don't understand anything about them. Like I don't even know how to exit out of menus and stuff. It's like stressful. And if you want to know like how much that matters, Microsoft was the second one to word processing. There used to be, I think it was called Dr. DOS or something, and it was like a word processor that cost like $900 at the time. And it was out for a while before Microsoft Word came out. And this is very similar to what we see today. Microsoft created Microsoft Word for literally about 1/10 of the cost. And they were worried about people not being able to use their product because of the switch. And so they actually added an option in their menu that you could click, and it would rearrange all the buttons to mirror Dr. DOS. Yeah, take that. And now, obviously, we all use Microsoft Word. Now, what I will say is high buyer information. That is true. People know a lot about phones, computers, all that stuff nowadays. Or you at least have a lot of access to it. That's actually not fair. You got a lot of access to car information. A lot of people don't know it. People tend, especially in America, to understand what they're buying when it comes to those products. Now, I just have to take their word for this because I don't know. The power of suppliers is a weak force. Apparently, there's a high number of suppliers, high overall supply. So Apple's not worried about getting whatever they need to make their product. Threat of substitutes, high availability of substitutes. That's probably fairly true. Low performance of substitutes. I'm not 100% what they were trying to get out with this, and it bothered me that they didn't cover it very well. But I did like their example overall. I should have posted the deal so you guys can all read it. I think they're trying to say that other products don't perform as well as theirs. So the threat of substitute's not really there, if that makes sense. Threat of new entrants, moderate force. There's high capital requirements to get into what they're doing. There's definitely capacity for new entrants, though. I mean, would anybody here be that shocked if tomorrow Meta or Facebook decided that they were going to make phones? Like, it's not that shocking, right? Now, we only look at like a few phones out there, really. But there's so many large tech firms that it wouldn't be too shocking if they tried. I mean, Razer makes video game control keyboards and mouses and stuff like that. And Razer tried to make a phone not too many years ago. They weren't very successful, but they tried to make a phone and they got it on the market. So they argued that the competitive rivalry is strong, which is true among like Apple, Microsoft, Motorola, all the Samsung. So it's highly aggressive firms, low I can never say this word, differentiation of products. This is one that I'm like, I don't know. I feel like Apple phones are quite a bit different than other phones, like in a good way. I mean, just personal preference, I guess, but maybe not. I mean, my wife switched from Apple to Android, didn't skip a beat. I use Android for one nerdy reason only, because I could turn it into a Game Boy. Yes, because Apple has like everything locked, so you can't do a lot of things unless you like jailbreak it. But Android's like, do whatever you want with the phone. It'll like turn it into a bomb. Like it doesn't matter, and you can do anything you want. Now, I do not want to spend a lot of time on strategic groups at all. In fact, I'm considering skipping over it for the sake of time. Do I want to? So, strategic groups are typically groups of organizations within an industry that share similar strategies. That's what a strategic group is. So it's like we have to operate in similar ways to do what we're doing. I don't know this for a fact, but like Ford and Dodge maybe in that category, they have similar strategies. We're going to market towards this, we're going to do this, we're going to produce this, we're going to innovate here. That's what they're trying to do. I always want to use Apple and Microsoft, but they honestly kind of approach it differently. Microsoft really leans into software, and Apple leans into like ease of use and slick. I'm not sure, but it is important to say that no two firms are exactly different, and no two firms are completely the same. So even groups that are within a strategic group are obviously different, but they may have similar strategies. They could share similar prices, quality, degree of vertical integration, types of different distribution systems. I mean, that way you could think about Microsoft and Apple being the same. I think Apple's generally a little bit more expensive, but they're like all in the same kind of realm, you know. Kind of like buying like I think it's like an Acer makes those laptops at like Walmart for like $300, and they're fantastic, by the way. I've had several friends get them from school, and they work great with that. So we could talk about this a little bit. As a strategic tool, what people do is they go and they have you try to think about every organization that operates similar to yours, or if you're a case study, operates similar to your clients. Who's similar to you, and like where are they going, and what are they trying to do, and where are you going as a group? And by looking at other organizations that are so similar to yourself, you can kind of get an idea of where we're going or what we should do. I mean, like Microsoft, I'm sure was monitoring Apple when Apple released a phone. Microsoft had to really consider releasing a phone. I'm pretty sure they ended up releasing one and it didn't do so well. Don't know. I don't know how much hand Microsoft has in phones at all. They surely have a hand in some sort of software, but maybe not. But now we're going to move on to attendance stuff. Got some slides there if you want to see it. So, Dispel and Porter's 5 forces. Now, you guys are in a unique situation. I want to make sure I say this. So typically, please do the time ask. So typically when we do case studies, you're given a case to read, right? And you have access to information that's not necessarily readily available, right? Or you're working for a company and you have access to information that's not public or readily available. That's how it works. The one major case study that I really recall doing myself was when Boeing was trying to open up a new factory here in Oklahoma. And I did consulting with them and like a group of people, and they had like several different groups do it. And we were giving like contract details, like their military contract details of like how much it costs them to make planes, how much the military is expecting. And they were trying to figure out where are we going to put our employees and which manufacturing plant should be developing these planes? Like what's going to be the fastest and most cost efficient? And so we had like access to a lot of detail. The problem with like class casework is like you're given cases that people have to write, but it's usually done with like available information. So no matter what you do in classes, it's always like casework light. Does that make sense? Yeah. So for Best Buy, and also most of them mostly focus on the internal environment. For Best Buy, I originally had a couple of case ideas for them, like cases people had written. However, they were mostly either publicly available information or they really focused on internal. And we need to focus on external. So these two can be done very much so with public information and your own perception of Best Buy. Does that make sense? So there's no case you have to read for this one. But what I did do was I added a couple or a few sites you can look at that are pretty common. I put Wikipedia on here because despite what professors say, it's pretty damn accurate. Every student agrees. Wikipedia is an accurate as hell source. for the most part. And they also put their sites at the bottom. So like, just don't quote anything that's not cited. So I put the Wikipedia there. This is their actual website, Best Buy's website. Also, Statistica, is that it? I've never used. I haven't used them a lot. They do a lot of the corporate statistics, and then Reuters also does a lot of the corporate statistics. They also have a lot of different documents from like Times Magazine and New York Times and stuff like that about Best Buy, so you can get a lot of information there. Also, if you need to find Best Buy's competitors, it's pretty easy. So just like last time, there is a Dropbox in Canvas, so I only need one submission. Break them into groups however you want. And what I need is quickly, don't spend too much time on this, at least one example of each of these that affect Best Buy and the industry that they're in, and then briefly like a sentence about how it impacts their industry. And then same thing for the 5 forces. I need to know, are each of these high or low, right? Is competitiveness high or is it low? Each of these, and then briefly explain. And then I can't stress how much I care significantly less about these right now. If you have time, you are welcome to put issues and problems that they should address, and a bunch of the firm do. But for sure, everybody should get through these. Cool? I don't care. You don't have to use this chart. I don't care how you do it. As long as I can see these, I just put this in there because it's simple. I mean, you can if you want, but however. So need these, break them into groups, do that. Most of the information is readily available for Best Buy. Also, most people have a general understanding of Best Buy and like the electronics. What do you call that industry? Electronic retail, maybe what it is. All right, so take a second. I think we'll take like 20 to 30 minutes. Cool? If you guys need to take like a couple minutes before you start, I understand.